October the 2nd, 2025. Guys, you're looking at some of the newest released images of the object Atlas. What you're seeing here is a very bright light, guys. It went from a 12-point mag into about 11.5 mag just about a week ago. And the lower the number, the brighter it's getting, and you can tell that. But what you're seeing is probably 8 frames of the shutter being held open, exposure time. This is a north and south line. The sun is 104 degrees behind this object. And notice there's still no tail. It's getting brighter and brighter, but no tail. And you can see these are singular objects, stars in the background mostly. And so they've got a blur because of the open exposure time. So does the trail end of what I think is an ion gas release. People are trying to say it's a comet. I don't think so. I don't think it's an asteroid because asteroids don't emit any type of gas and light like that. An asteroid can emit light with radar detection, but if it turns a reflective side towards the sun. But this is pretty constant. And again, if you look at the comets, they have your standard dust trail or debris trail, and then you have a straight line trail behind them that is an indirect line or the opposite of the sun. In other words, say so, this is Sol, it's 104 degrees of the sun in this direction. And so the ion tail would be this direction, exactly opposite of the sun, and your debris trail would be more out this way because it is debris coming off the object, and then the ion tail is solar wind blowing from the sun across the object, okay? So right now we got very high solar winds. The brightness could be increasing even more. But for you guys that remember in the days sailing or boating or in an airplane, and I've done it many times, but you've got what's called a map. You're looking at a pretty good scale map, and then you take a parallel rule once you determine where you're at, and it's 2 rulers side by side that are hinged, so you can expand them out or close them, but get a parallel line with something else on the whatever you're looking at. So if you came out from the back of Atlas here, you'd want to drop that parallel ruler in one of these spaces here, and it would go right out the side. That's the ion tail. Now, that's why I'm thinking we got increased solar wind. It's getting brighter, but there's ions involved in space. And when you're dealing with solar wind, you get an ion tail on an object if it's a comet. But if it's not, are we looking at something that has what's called an ion engine? We're going to talk about that. Don't go away too quick, because NASA has had one for years. And I guarantee you 10 out of 9 inventions that NASA has came from much superior intelligence. Now here they've superimposed Atlas over what's called a still background. We talked about this a few videos back. If they showed the actual image that this blur is from, guys, you would see all the details of the stars like you just saw them in the black and white. But they will admit it. They will take this, edit it out of the moving background and put it over still background to make it look cooler, I guess, whatever. But you're still getting no little big tail and no ion tail. I think it's actually using the solar wind as energy because it's ion driven. And for instance, this is called the Deep Space One's ion engine from the NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory, or the JPL, out in Pasadena, California, guys. And that's what they're using. Now, you don't accelerate real fast or real slow or anything like that, but it's so efficient it remains a steady propulsion system through space. And I think that what we're dealing with Atlas is very similar to this ion drive, except much more sophisticated. Now, that's why we're seeing the glow that we're seeing from the ion engines. Just bear me out again. It exists. You're looking at it, right? But Atlas is supposedly coming from a long way away, much further than any of our satellites have traveled, according to the information. This would be the first time and last time that our generations would see it pass, according to the arc angles and all the measurements of its its path. Again, this is another NASA concept engine graph. It says NASA's electrifying new propulsion system. And ions are electric, solar wind is electric, and whatever or whoever built the technology that's dealing with Atlas knows very well what these ion engines can do. Notice there's not a debris trail even in the concept drawings, but they have. I'll show you a real test, but there's not a debris trail of anything. The glow is coming from the ion engines. Now let's go back in time just a little bit. This is taken in 1999. It's actual image of an ion engine from NASA at the JPL again. The 2.3 kilowatt K-STAR ion thruster developed by NASA from the Deep Space One spacecraft during a hot fire test at the JPL 1999. Again, that's about all the debris trail we're seeing right there. And again, when you talk about ion tails and trails, the closer you get to the sun, the higher the solar wind speed is, and you add those together, you're going to have brightening ion emissions from whatever object it's propelling. And it actually reminds me of some of the techniques that they use at CERN, but it says ion engines work by using electricity to accelerate ions, which are charged atoms, to very high speeds, creating a small but continuous thrust that propels spacecraft over long periods of time. They're highly fuel efficient and are powered by electricity, often from solar panels or solar energy. Guys, think about it. Think about the solar energy, the solar wind, and its electrons, ions, protons. It says this makes them ideal for deep space missions when continuous acceleration is more important than a strong short burst of power, guys. Again, you need electricity. Where are you getting it? From the sun. This goes even to what some would call part of the Black Knight satellite technology, which is really very ancient. It says this technology is used for tasks like maintaining satellite orbits and performing complex maneuvers for deep space probes. It's kind of like what we're seeing. And so again, this is since 1999, guys, so we're dealing with very old, not very old, but old technology that's been around for a while, but I think the technology is ancient. And through this, and then I'll get off the ion engine thing, but you got ionization, which is a propellant gas such as xenon, is bombarded with electrons from where? Solar panels or the suns or the ion streams of the solar winds. Again, bombarded with electrons to remove some of its electrons, creating positive charged ions. Plasma formation, that's the glow. The resulting mix of ions and electrons form a plasma. Acceleration, electromagnetic fields often have a high voltage grid accelerate these positive charge ions to extremely high speeds. Thrust generation, the ejection of these ions out the back of the spacecraft creates a small but constant thrust in the opposite direction, moving the spacecraft forward. Now there are modern intake systems now to where you get a glow out of both ends, and you've seen it on the front of jets. You've seen it even in science fiction as far as Star Trek on the main ship, the Enterprise. Anyway, characteristics, high efficiency. Ion engines use a small amount of propellant to achieve significant velocity due to the high speed of the injected ions. Continuous acceleration. That's one of the first things that we saw in the first month or so of Atlas. Unlike chemical rockets that provide powerful but brief thrust, ion engines provide a small thrust that can operate for months or years. They allow for continuous acceleration. And that's what we're seeing now, starting to speed up. Power source. The required electricity is typically supplied by solar panels, a system known as solar electric propulsion. And remember solar panels. No moving parts. Many ion thrusters designs have no high temperature components or moving parts, leading to less maintenance and that makes whatever travel you're doing with it much longer, much more efficient. And one of the applications, guys, and this is kind of going back to what Avi Loeb was talking about, deep space missions. They enable spacecraft to make complex maneuvers for distant science missions such as NASA's Dawn or DART missions, and ESA, which is the European Space Agency. Smart One reports that from the European Space Agency, in other words, it can make complex maneuvers for distant science missions, except we're dealing with much more advanced stuff than NASA has. Now, this is just another illustration, guys, but notice the solar panels fold in and out. That's where they can fold them in if it's got all the thrust or charge it needs at that point. They can fold them back out, whatever they need. But again, it needed that solar energy. That's important. Now, that brings me here because I want to look at back in history or anywhere I can to find something similar to that. Now, the Black Knight satellite, they've been talking about this thing for dozens and dozens of years in science. It was first spotted by different radar tracking, things like that. They didn't know what it was. Then we started getting some space shuttle images of it. And most of the depictions of it show that it does have folding type wings. Now, what's interesting about that is that if it's goes back to this, and they talked about it for a long time. We haven't heard much about it since. Has it gone? Are we just not detecting it? By the way, they detected that it had a polar orbit, which went over the North Pole and South Pole and gave the object a full view of just about everything. Now, in modern times, I think basically once they spotted it, had it on radar and things like that, they were told to stand down and leave this thing alone. And guys, there's some strange coincidence about this. I don't know if it's still there. We haven't seen any pictures for a few years, or for a while there was quite a few out. Did it leave? Or is it still there? We're not being shown any images of it. And I think Atlas is part of something like this. The reason I say that is because if you look back into some of the very oldest biblical literature that was taken out, you've got Enoch taken out, and you also have Baruch taken out, B-A-R-U-C-H, maybe. Anyway, U-A-C-H, Book of Baruch. And the older ones say the revelation, of Baruch. But he's talking about being taken up and shown ships back then in the Old Testament days, similar to this, that had a crew, and they would fold the wings would fold out, and then they would fold back in. I guess maybe some kind of charging time or whatever. If it's not moving, it doesn't need that much constant propulsion like you would see in Atlas. But going back into that time, you look at the different civilizations, and all they talk about, everyone, is someone coming from the sky gods, Christianity, Christ, all the way through. Egyptian sky gods, and Mexico, the Aztecs, the Inca sky gods, Japanese and Chinese dragon sky gods, skycraft. Then how does that tie together? I'm not sure, but I want to show you something that's very interesting, and you may be looking at one of the craft that are dealing with what I'm about to show you. If you go back to Egyptian times, and every time before that, with the Anunnaki, and you go past that with the Greeks and the Romans, there were 9 gods for every one of them. Even Mexico. Now, you had lesser demigods, like some of the mixtures. But if you look at this, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And you've got the names of them there. But if you go back here, now we're looking at the Council of Lightning. This was Empress Marcus Aurelius, and these are members of the imperial family, they say, in sacrifice. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and again the sacrificial bull. Why are these 9 important? What happened to them? Are they still here? Some call them the Watchers and the Guardians of the planet. Now, Pliny, one of the philosophers, mentions 9 gods of the Etruscans who had the power of wielding thunderbolts, pointing towards Martinus and Novoselius as gods pertaining to the use of thunder and lightning. Guys, and they have them called this is the imperial pantheon of the 9 divine. Now, you're going to see this going through almost all religions. You have lesser gods or demigods, but you have 9 people in charge. Now, what they're not showing here is the 10th top god, the one that they're talking about. You're talking about Elyon, then you talk about the council of gods, and there's 9 powerful ones there in almost every religion. You go back to Enlil, and Enki. All of that, you got 9 people that come, they go into different civilizations, create a religion and a worship system from nation to nation back in the day. And you'll see it more and more as you start looking up. Just look up the 9 gods. Just type that in, of the nations. And you'll start to see that there's 9 individuals that are very important to all the civilizations that have very similar MOs. Is that what we're seeing? If there's a return of anything, it would be of this group. The reason I say that, we don't know if they were the same or they were different, but we do know that the same 9 turned up at the beginning of civilizations. Greek, Roman, they had different names. Again, Enlil, Enki, that group, 9 of those. Think about that. And in the book of Baruch, again, this is chapter 3, it's out of the Greek Apocalypse of Baruch. It says they're calling it the guardian of the earth. This craft is a massive, unique bird called a phoenix. The text is a non-canonical Jewish work written sometimes after the destruction of the temple in AD 70. In the text, the prophet Baruch is taken on a tour of the heavens, kind of like Enoch, and asks an angel about the giant bird he sees flying alongside the sun. The angel explains its role. The bird flies along the sun and expands its wings, and he's talking about a craft to catch the sun's fiery rays. The bird is necessary to prevent the sun's heat from scorching and destroying the earth and all living creatures. God specifically appointed the bird for this purpose. He's called the guardian of the planet. Now, what is Baruch talking about? And like I said, things like the Black Knight go back forever. These 9 lesser gods keep appearing after destructions of certain civilizations. Come back, different names that mostly are appointed by whatever that race or civilization recognizes them as, and they try to lead them either out of chaos or whatever. But again, the guardian of the planet. Is that what we're dealing with, people? We've kind of hinted on that as some type of return, but it's not a comet and it's not an asteroid. But I thought it would be kind of interesting to talk about this, guys. I'm still looking into it. And so keep your eyes open for the updates on that. We got a couple other things we're watching. But again, this is a heads up. Be safe.